The Living Arsenal. Chapter 1, Desolation's Embrace. The stars, once a source of wonder and inspiration, now seemed cold and distant, indifferent to the suffering of a dying galaxy. The Milky Way, once a vibrant tapestry of light, now pulsed with the crimson glow of war. The year was 2242, and humanity was losing its grip on the cosmos. Inside the cramped belly of the dropship, Sergeant David Ace Nguyen felt the tension thrumming through the air, a palpable thing that clung to his skin like a second layer. The dull roar of the engines did little to drown out the erratic thumping of his heart. Ace ran a gloved hand over the smooth obsidian surface of his Xenolith arm guard. The alien artifact fused to his flesh, a constant reminder of the darkness within. It was a symbiotic parasite, a sentient weapon that granted him superhuman strength, speed, and resilience. But it was also a curse, a gnawing hunger that whispered promises of power and glory, tempting him to surrender his humanity. He glanced at his squad mates, their faces drawn tight with a mix of fear and grim determination. Corporal Anya Sparks Petrova, their demolitions expert, fidgeted with a loose wire on her Xenolith-enhanced gauntlet, her eyes darting nervously around the cramped space. Lieutenant Marcus Echo Chen, their communications specialist, sat hunched over his console, his fingers dancing across the keys with a speed that belied his normally calm demeanor. And then there was Sergeant Major Isabella Ironheart Rossi, their medic and the squad's moral compass, her gaze fixed on the distance, a silent prayer on her lips. Each one of them bore the mark of the Xenolith, the bioorganic weave subtly altering their features, hardening their eyes. They were the living arsenal, humanity's last desperate gamble, warriors forged in the crucible of war and alien technology. They were the ones who were supposed to make a difference, to turn the tide of the war against the Krill, a relentless alien race that had pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. Captain William Ghost Tanaka's voice crackled over the comm, his tone a mix of steely resolve and weary resignation. 30 seconds to drop zone, Arsenal. Remember your training. This is it. Make it count. Ace nodded, his throat tight. He knew the stakes. Earth's defenses had crumbled, its fleets reduced to smoldering wreckage. The Arsenal's mission was to secure a vital Krill energy source, a desperate attempt to buy time, to give humanity a fighting chance. A sudden jolt rocked the dropship, alarms blaring. Through the viewport, Ace saw a swarm of Krill fighters streaking towards them, their plasma cannons spitting fire. "We're hit!" Sparks shouted, her voice barely audible over the din. The dropship shuddered violently, its engines sputtering. Ace braced himself as the craft plummeted towards the alien world below, a desolate landscape of jagged mountains and barren plains bathed in the eerie glow of a dying sun. The impact was brutal, a symphony of screeching metal and shattering glass. The world turned upside down, then black. When Ace regained consciousness, he was surrounded by the wreckage of the dropship. Bodies lay scattered amidst the debris, their Xenoliths glowing faintly in the dim light. A wave of nausea washed over him, but he pushed it down, focusing on the mission, on survival. He staggered to his feet, his ears ringing, his vision blurred. He took a deep breath, the acrid smoke stinging his lungs. "Captain, Sparks, Echo, Ironheart," he called out, his voice barely a whisper. There was no answer. Only the silence of death and the mournful howl of the alien wind. Ace's heart sank as he scanned the wreckage. He was alone. A wave of despair washed over him, threatening to drown him in its depths. But deep within him, a spark of defiance remained. He was a soldier, a warrior. He would not surrender. Not while a single breath remained in his body. "On your feet, Arsenal," he rasped, his voice growing stronger. "We may be lost, but we are not beaten. We will survive. We will fight." He raised his Xenolith-enhanced arm, the obsidian surface glowing with an eerie light. "And we will find a way to turn this tide, no matter the cost." Chapter 2. Hunted on an alien world. The alien sun beat down mercilessly, its rays scorching the barren landscape. Ace squinted against the glare, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. A fine layer of dust coated his armor, clinging to the sweat on his brow. The air was thin and dry, making each breath a struggle. We need to find shelter. Captain Petrova's voice rasped over the comm, her usually firm tone tinged with exhaustion. This sun is cooking us alive. Ace nodded, his throat parched. Agreed. And water, we're running low. The squad moved in a tight formation, weapons at the ready. Their footsteps crunched on the rocky ground, the only sound in the oppressive silence of the alien wasteland. Sparks, her face etched with worry, stumbled over a loose rock, her Xenolith-enhanced reflexes barely saving her from a nasty fall. Damn it, she cursed, her voice sharp with frustration. This place is a death trap. Echo, usually the quiet one, chimed in, his voice strained. We're sitting ducks out here. The krill could be anywhere. Ace glanced at Ironheart, who was lagging behind, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The Xenoliths' regenerative powers were keeping her alive, but even they had their limits. We'll find a place to rest soon, Ace reassured her. Just hang in there. Hours later, they found refuge in a narrow ravine, its walls providing a welcome respite from the scorching sun. Ace set up a perimeter while the others collapsed, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. Sparks, her temper frayed, lashed out at Echo, blaming him for the failed mission. If you hadn't screwed up the comms, we wouldn't be in this mess, she spat, her eyes blazing with anger. Echo, usually unflappable, snapped back. I did everything I could. It was the krill jamming signal, not my fault. Ace stepped between them, his voice firm. Enough! We're all on edge, but we need to stick together. Infighting won't get us out of this. The tension simmered, but the resentment lingered. Ace knew the Xenoliths were fueling their anger, amplifying their emotions. He felt it too, the darkness clawing at the edges of his mind, urging him to lash out, to give in to the primal rage. While the others rested, Ace climbed to a higher vantage point, his Xenolith-enhanced vision scanning the horizon. Movement caught his eye, a glint of metal in the distance. A krill patrol. He raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger, but then he hesitated. The krill were moving towards a cluster of ruins, ancient structures half buried in the sand. Curiosity gnawed at him. He lowered his weapon and made his way towards the ruins, his footsteps silent as a ghost. The ruins were unlike anything he had ever seen, their architecture alien and imposing. He traced the strange symbols etched into the walls, feeling a strange resonance with the Xenolith within him. The symbols seemed to speak to him, their meaning just out of reach. Ace spent hours poring over the ruins, deciphering the symbols. As the sun began to set, he finally understood. The Xenoliths were not mere weapons, but fragments of a once unified sentient being, desperately seeking reunification. Ace's heart pounded in his chest. This revelation changed everything. It explained the Xenoliths' insidious influence, their relentless hunger for power. They were not content to be mere tools. They craved wholeness, even if it meant consuming their hosts entirely. A shiver ran down Ace's spine as he realized the true cost of his power. He was not just a soldier, a weapon. He was a host, a vessel for an alien entity that sought to consume his very soul. As darkness fell, Ace returned to his squad, the weight of his discovery heavy on his shoulders. He knew he had to tell them, to warn them of the danger they faced. But as he looked at their weary faces, their eyes filled with fear and desperation, he hesitated. He knew the truth would shatter their fragile unity, their last hope of survival. But he also knew he couldn't keep it from them. He had to give them a choice, a chance to fight back against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Chapter 3, The Fractured Truth. The flickering light of the campfire danced on the canyon walls, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to twist and writhe like living things. Ace sat apart from his squad, his eyes fixed on the ancient symbols he had etched into the dirt. The Xenolith on his arm thrummed with a low, insistent hum, a constant reminder of the darkness lurking beneath his skin. He traced the symbols with a trembling finger, the strange characters resonating with a power he couldn't fully comprehend. The Xenolith whispered in his mind, its voice a seductive hiss, urging him to embrace the knowledge, the power, the truth. Ace, what are you doing? Captain Petrova's voice cut through the silence, her tone a mix of concern and suspicion. Ace looked up, his eyes meeting hers. I think I figured it out, Captain, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The Xenoliths, They're not what we thought they were. The others gathered around, their faces etched with curiosity and a hint of fear. Ace explained his discovery, his words slow and deliberate, each syllable heavy with the weight of the revelation. "They're not just weapons, Captain," he said. "They're fragments of a once unified sentient being, shattered long ago. They crave reunification, and they'll do anything to achieve it, even if it means consuming our souls." A stunned silence fell over the group. Sparks's eyes widened in horror, while Echo's face paled. Ironheart's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. "Are you sure?" Petrova asked, her voice barely audible. "I'm certain," Ace replied, his gaze unwavering. "We're not just soldiers, Captain. We're hosts, vessels for a parasitic entity that seeks to consume us entirely." The news hit the squad like a physical blow. Some, like Sparks, reacted with anger and defiance, cursing the Xenoliths and vowing to resist their influence. Others, like Echo, retreated into themselves, their faces etched with despair and resignation. Ironheart, ever the voice of reason, spoke up. "We can't give up," she said, her voice firm. "We have to fight back. We have to find a way to control these things, to use their power without losing ourselves." But Ace knew it wouldn't be easy. The Xenoliths were insidious, their influence subtle but relentless. He felt it in his own body, the darkness creeping into the corners of his mind, whispering promises of power and glory, tempting him to surrender. The days that followed were a blur of survival and despair. The squad scavenged for food and water, their supplies dwindling rapidly. The krill continued to hunt them, their relentless pursuit a constant reminder of their vulnerability. Ace, burdened by his knowledge, grew increasingly withdrawn. He spent hours poring over the ancient symbols, searching for a way to break the Xenoliths' hold on his squad. But the answers eluded him, and the darkness within him continued to grow. One night, as he lay awake, staring up at the alien stars, a desperate plan formed in his mind. If they could harness the Xenoliths' power, they could send a distress signal to a nearby human fleet. But the ritual required to amplify their signal was dangerous, and it could push them further into the abyss. Ace knew the risks, but he also knew they were running out of options. He gathered his squad and explained his plan, his voice filled with a desperate hope. "This is our only chance," he said. "It's a gamble, but it's a gamble we have to take." The squad looked at him, their faces a mixture of fear, hope, and resignation. They knew the dangers, but they also knew they had nothing left to lose. With a shared nod, they prepared for the ritual, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The fate of the squad, and perhaps the future of humanity, hung in the balance. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, the very stones of the ancient ruins humming with anticipation. Ace stood at the center of the makeshift circle, his squad mates forming a ring around him. Their faces, normally stoic and battle-hardened, were now contorted in a grotesque dance of fear and anticipation. The Xenoliths on their bodies pulsed with an eerie light, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. Ace took a deep breath, the taste of ozone filling his mouth. He knew this was a gamble, a desperate grasp at a lifeline in the face of impending doom. But he also knew there was no other choice. They were cornered, their supplies dwindling, their bodies battered and bruised. He raised his arms, the Xenolith on his arm pulsating in sync with his racing heart. The ancient symbols he had etched into the ground glowed with an otherworldly light, their power resonating through him. "Brothers and sisters," Ace's voice boomed, amplified by the Xenolith. "Tonight, we defy the odds. Tonight, we reach out to the stars and reclaim our destiny." The squad joined him in the ritualistic chant, their voices a discordant chorus echoing through the canyon. The air grew heavy, the energy building to an unbearable crescendo. Ace felt the Xenolith within him surge with power, its tendrils reaching deep into his soul, pulling him towards the abyss. He fought back, clinging to the fading embers of his humanity. He thought of his family, his friends, the life he once knew. He thought of the innocent lives lost in the war, the countless sacrifices made in the name of freedom. "For Earth!" Ace roared, unleashing the full force of the Xenolith's power. A blinding light erupted from the circle, a shockwave of pure energy that rippled across the landscape. The very air seemed to scream in agony as the Xenoliths drew upon their ancient power, their collective consciousness reaching out across the vast expanse of space. Miles away, a human fleet patrolling the edge of Krill territory detected the energy surge, a beacon of hope in a sea of despair. But they were too far, too late. For back on the desolate world, the ritual had taken its toll. The Xenoliths' power surged through the squad, twisting their bodies, warping their minds. Their screams echoed through the canyon as they transformed into monstrous, barely recognizable figures. Ace, at the epicenter of the surge, felt his body tearing itself apart, his mind fracturing into 1,000 pieces. The Xenolith consumed him, its tendrils burrowing deep into his soul, replacing his humanity with a primal rage. When the dust settled, Ace stood alone, a monstrous silhouette against the flickering light of the dying campfire. His skin was now a patchwork of chitinous plates, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. His Xenolith armguard had fused with his flesh, becoming an extension of his being. The human fleet arrived just in time to witness the aftermath of the ritual. They saw the monstrous Ace standing amidst the wreckage, the other members of the squad transformed beyond recognition. They saw the raw, unbridled power that surged through him, and they trembled with a mixture of awe and fear. They had found their savior, but at what cost? Chapter 5, The Burden of Power. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a tidal wave of cheers and applause that washed over Ace as he stood on the balcony overlooking a war-torn earth. Below, a sea of faces, gaunt and weary, looked up at him with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They hailed him as a savior, the hero who had single-handedly turned the tide of the war against the Krill. But Ace saw only the monster reflected in their eyes. He had returned to Earth a changed man, his body a grotesque mockery of its former self. The Xenolith had consumed him, twisting his flesh, amplifying his every instinct. He was a creature of rage and power, a living weapon fueled by an insatiable hunger. In the quiet solitude of his quarters, Ace stared at his reflection in the mirror. The face that stared back was alien, monstrous. His skin was a patchwork of chitinous plates, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. Sharp, jagged horns protruded from his forehead, and his once human hands had been replaced by claws as sharp as razors. He recoiled in disgust, a wave of nausea rising in his throat. This was not him. This was not the man he once was. He was a prisoner in his own body, a slave to the Xenolith's insatiable hunger for power. Nightmares plagued his sleep, visions of destruction and carnage filling his mind. He saw himself tearing through Krill fleets, his claws dripping with alien blood. He saw himself turning on his own people, his rage consuming everything in its path. He tried to meditate, to focus on the memories of his past, of his family, his friends, the life he once knew. But the Xenolith's whispers were always there, a constant temptation, a siren song promising ultimate power. The news of a new Krill offensive shattered Ace's fragile peace. A massive armada, larger and more powerful than ever before, was bearing down on Earth. Humanity's leaders, desperate for any advantage, turned to Ace, their last hope. General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, a grizzled veteran with a reputation for ruthlessness, stood before Ace, his eyes cold and calculating. "You are our only hope, Nguyen," he said. "Your power is the only thing that can save us from annihilation. We need you to unleash the beast within." Ace hesitated, his heart heavy with dread. He knew the general was right. The Xenolith's power was immense, capable of unimaginable destruction. But he also knew the cost. He had seen the darkness in his own eyes, the hunger that gnawed at his soul. He took a deep breath, his voice a low growl. "I will fight for Earth, General, but I will not be your weapon." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "You have no choice, Nguyen. The fate of humanity rests on your shoulders." Ace turned away, his gaze fixed on the distant stars. He knew the general was wrong. He did have a choice. He could embrace the darkness, become the monster they all feared, and unleash his fury upon the Krill. Or he could resist, fight for his humanity, and find a way to control the power within him. The decision was his and his alone, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Chapter 6, A Glimmer of Hope. The void of space throbbed with the thunder of war. Krill dreadnoughts, colossal leviathans of metal and malice, filled Ace's vision. His monstrous form surged forward, a lone figure against an armada. The Xenolith raged within him, a symphony of alien fury. Its power was a tidal wave threatening to drown him. Yet Ace clung to a single thought, a fragment of the ancient writings echoing in his mind. Control, not consumption. Plasma fire seared past him, leaving trails of ionized gas in its wake. Ace wove through the deadly ballet, his movements a blur of monstrous grace. He could feel the Xenolith's hunger, its desire to lash out, to consume. But Ace held it back, his will a fragile dam against the raging torrent. He reached the nearest dreadnought, its hull scarred and pitted from countless battles. With a roar, Ace tore into it, his claws ripping through metal as if it were paper. Krill warriors swarmed him, their energy weapons blazing, but he shrugged them off like gnats. The Xenolith's regenerative powers healed his wounds almost as quickly as they were inflicted. Deep within the dreadnought, Ace found the power core, a glowing orb of raw energy. He reached out, his clawed hand hovering inches from its surface. The Xenolith screamed for him to take it, to consume its power and become unstoppable. But Ace hesitated. He remembered the faces of his squad, their humanity fading as the Xenolith consumed them. He remembered the desolation of Earth, the broken cities, the desperate faces of the survivors. He remembered his own humanity, the fragments of it that still clung to his soul. "No," he growled, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This is not who I am." With a surge of willpower, Ace channeled the Xenolith's energy, not into himself but into the dreadnought's power core. The orb pulsed with an intense light, the air growing thick with ozone. Ace felt the ship shudder beneath him, its systems overloading. He leapt clear as the dreadnought exploded, a blinding flash that lit up the void. The shockwave sent him tumbling through space, but the Xenolith's power shielded him from harm. Ace's action sent a ripple through the battle. The human fleet, inspired by his sacrifice, fought with renewed ferocity. The Krill, sensing a shift in the tide, began to falter. Ace continued his onslaught, each strike a calculated blow, each action fueled not by rage but by a desperate hope. Ship by ship, the Krill armada fell. When the last dreadnought was reduced to a cloud of debris, a cheer erupted from the human fleet. They had won against all odds. Ace drifted through the wreckage, his body aching, his mind exhausted. But for the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of peace. He had found a way to control the Xenolith, to use its power for good. He returned to Earth a changed man, scarred and broken, but not consumed. He dedicated himself to finding a cure for the Xenolith's corruption, establishing a research facility where he could help others like him reclaim their humanity. He became a symbol of hope, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. The living arsenal was disbanded, but Ace's legacy lived on. Humanity had not only survived, but thrived. And in the heart of darkness, a glimmer of hope had emerged, a testament to the unwavering spirit that refused to surrender.